Pat yourself on the back because you are right here, right now, for a reason. Welcome to the On Purpose podcast, where together we will empower ourselves and others to live lives with more passion and purpose.
How you doing this morning, Jerrod?
I'm awesome, my friend. How are you?
Grateful and blessed, baby. Feeling good.
Rocking a little ponytail today?
Oh yeah, man. Got the man pony going.
I love it. Yeah. I don't know that his hair is crazy long now. And there's part of me that's like, dang it, I shouldn't have been shaving my head all these years I had hair.
You know, it's funny. Just the other day, I was like, man, maybe I should just cut it all off because it's so hot and humid over here.
Yeah.
But every time I cut my hair short when it was long, I'm always like, oh man, I should have hung in there and like kept going. So I'm staying strong.
Yeah, I think you got to hang in there with it. Because I actually had a time where I started growing it out just to see what it would be. But I was like, oh no, that ain't happening. I'm not gonna, I can't do it no more. So yeah, you got to keep it long while you can, man.
Yeah.
How's things down there?
It's good, man. It's definitely warm. I walk out and insta sweat, but I like it. I feel like I'm living in a jungle kind of because we got, it's real green. It's rainy season too, so thunderstorms. Hasn't been every day, but every couple days there'll be a thunderstorm.
Yeah.
And it's kind of beautiful, honestly. Like I like sitting out in our lanai, I think is what these damn sunroom things are called, a lanai. And
Not a bidet.
Not a bidet. But we have one of those too. Shout out Tushy. No affiliation with them, but if you like to wash your ass with some water, get yourself a Tushy. But the thunderstorms, man, they're kind of nice to sit out there and check them out. But poor Chloe, man, geez, we've really been up in the pet CBD with her because she's just so scared of thunder.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I remember we went to Disney World. Shoot, the kids were little in the middle of the summer, and we'd be at the water parks, and the rain would come in. But it's Florida rain, so it's still warm. It's not like freezing. And all these people would run and go like hide from the rain. And we're like, dude, we're at a water park. We're already wet. So we'd love because they would run and leave, and then we'd move to the front of the line and just stand there. And as soon as they reopen the rides, we'd get to go.
Oh, nice. Yeah, the warm rain is nice.
It is. Yeah, it's like a bath.
We did a run the other day in some warm rain, and I kid you not, Jerrod, it was my probably the favorite run of my life. Like I could not remember a time where I enjoyed running so much. It was just like a nice little warm rain, and we, run past some little trees and some leaves kind of brush your face. It was so nice.
That's awesome. Things are going well. Getting adjusted.
Things are going well. Yep, slowly but surely. Had a little gym mishap the other day. I guess I gotta calm down a little bit. But hey, figuring out some gym culture and stuff, and getting acclimated. But things are good.
Culture is culture, that's for sure. Well, one of my favorite quotes about culture is, you either train culture or you don't. But either way, you're creating culture. Like too many people think like, oh, we don't have to teach our employees or culture. Like they just understand it. Well, your culture is teaching them, right? Your culture is always changing. It's not something that just stays the same, much like us in life, right? We're always growing or we're not growing or never staying the same. So I'm excited for this episode because it kind of ties into moves both you and I have made recently, and something that I was not very good at, to be honest with you, for much of my life that I think I'm getting a little better at, and that is the purpose of loneliness and being alone. So Ollie, why do you think many of us view loneliness or being alone as a negative thing?
That is a deep question. I think that we just have so much always going on in the world, to where it's almost like we're conditioned to constantly be stimulated, social media, talking to coworkers, Zoom call, whatever, to where it's hard. It's hard for us to be alone. There's a study that I've talked about before that had a bunch of college students sit in a room, and all they had in the room, and all they were told is that they are to stay in this room by themselves for half an hour. And the only thing in the room is a button to where they can shock themselves. And they're just like, okay, there's a button here that'll shock you, but there's nothing else in the room. Just sit here for 30 minutes and we're going to come back and just observe how the half an hour went. And I forget the exact percentage, but it was overwhelming. It was like 80% or something of the people shocked themselves in the room because they couldn't stand just to be alone with no like stimuli and stimulation. So I think that's a big part of it, is we're so conditioned to constantly having some sort of stimulus going on, whether that's a person or a piece of technology, and that we have this belief that being alone is a sad thing to do, I guess. What do you think?
Well, it's interesting, right? Because other cultures, like meditation is like part of their daily routine. And that's all about being alone with your, like clearing your thoughts and just being alone in the present moment. So I think it's definitely a Western issue in that we kind of embraced, and that we've talked about before, this grind mentality, the hustle mentality, that you only have 24 hours in a day. So you got to pack as much as you can in every 24 hours a day. And what we find is over the long term, that has many negative consequences as well, right? We're mentally drained, physically drained. We're not taking care of our bodies. Emotionally, we're drained. We haven't loved like we should have loved. We don't have a lot of people in our lives because we focus so much on completing tasks that we missed, quite honestly, the journey. And I think loneliness and quiet time is essential to balance a lot of that out. But as employers or companies, we view that as unproductive time, right? Like, oh, if Ali sits and just clears his thoughts, even though maybe that sitting and clearing your thoughts and meditating for 10 minutes triggers some creative juices, and now you come back and solve the problem that stumped you for 3 days. Because there's not a product or something happening in those 10 minutes, we view it as a waste of time. And I think that's one of the why meditation is becoming much more mainstream and rising in popularity again, is people are realizing you can't go 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year for very long before you burn yourself out and you start suffering from trying to be busy all the time and not embracing the quiet side of life.
Yeah, I agree with that. It can,
and you're sold it, right? Like think about Vegas.
right.
Like Las Vegas to me is a perfect example. There's no clocks in any of the casinos. They pump them full of oxygen and light and noise and stimulus to just keep you going. Like a hamster in the wheel, right? Like you just don't even know you should be in bed already. You don't know it's 4 a.m., but you're still spending money.
Right.
But nobody promotes, or very few promote, like just sitting and meditating for 10 minutes is a product, right? Or we know it's good for us, but we won't take the time to do it. Right? Because we could send 4 more emails or watch 2 more YouTube videos, or, spend that 10 minutes catching up on social media. And you look like, what are we sold? We're sold that you always got to be in crowds. You got to be partying. Like, if you look at your social media feed, it's always people in group. You know what I mean? Like we're just kind of programmed, and I would say tricked a little bit, to forget that quiet time is also good for you.
Yeah. I agree. That is kind of mainstream, what we're taught, what we're told, what we're fed. but I have found that there's some major benefits to having some alone time, to having some quiet time, whether that's carved out a couple minutes a day with your meditation, or for an extended period of time, a few days, kind of like what you're going through now, of really isolating yourself in Wyoming. How has that been? Because this is all pretty fresh, right? It's been what, 4 weeks?
Yeah, yeah, 3.5, yeah, 4 weeks now, a month. It's good, man. It takes some getting used to, and like honestly, I'm not sure that's not why I didn't get sick the very first week I was up there for like 3 days. Was like just detoxifying from being around people all the time and technology all the time and stimulus all the time. Because when we're out there, there's maybe 6 of us within 40 acres. So like you have plenty of time to go off and be by yourself and just hear nature and reconnect. And I like it. And honestly, that's not something I was good at. If you'd have talked to Jerrod from probably even 5 years ago, all the way back, if I had downtime, I would go do something. Like I couldn't just sit and like listen to the birds or look for deer. And it's funny because there's, people are like, well, I don't see any deer. I don't see any of the turkeys walking by. And a lot of times the difference between those of us that seeing them and not seeing them is just stillness. Right? Like you get out to nature, it's an interesting balance, because if you're still, if you just sit, you will see so many different birds and you'll see deer walk by and you'll hear all this stuff. But if you're always going, always on the move, you won't see any of it. And to me, that's been a pretty interesting microcosm of life, is like how much busyness if I just put in my day because I thought I should be busy, that I really didn't see the cool, important stuff that was happening around me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy how much of a different view stillness can create through that stillness lens. So for you, Jerrod, how can spending time alone, or how has spending time alone been a good thing? I know just right now you mentioned it's almost like you got sick, like you were detoxifying. So after that experience, which sounds like it wasn't very pleasant,
No, not at all.
what were the good things and the positives that came out of spending time isolated in nature, being alone?
I think you get clarity of thought, right? Because like it's just you and your thoughts, and you can really think through. You don't have a ton of stimulation. You're not just looking at your phone every 20 seconds. You can get creative. Like for me, like it's easier to write when I'm out there. It's easier to think of what I want to be doing, who I want to be becoming, when I'm not just rushing from task to task and thing to thing. And it just slows you down. Like you realize, to me, one of the big things is you realize life is short, right? Many of us know. And when you get out to nature and you just get away from all the people and wherever your nature is, whether it's a park in the city or all the way out in the country, wherever it is, you just stop and listen. You can kind of appreciate all the small stuff that's going on around you, and take in that appreciation and start applying it to your life. Like, man, what are all the small things that are going on around me that I should appreciate, that maybe I missed, that maybe being busy I overlooked, and I didn't say I love you, or I didn't just enjoy this moment to its fullest because I was already thinking about getting to the next one. And then I think that's one of the best benefits, is realizing, you can slow life down. As much as, there's that, I forget what people say, but comments like life just goes by so fast, and as you get older, it goes faster. But I think if you take a proactive approach, you can slow life down. And that a lot of times is sitting and just slowing your thoughts down and taking moments to not be constantly on the go. But you moved to Florida, you left your whole community. So, you got you and Courtney down there, but not nearly the circle of influence you had up here, or the circle, just the constantness here. So how's it been a good thing for you?
Well, it's been a little bit of both, and I'll speak on what's been hard about it here a little later. But what's been good, a lot of it is exactly what you said, a lot of clarity. When you uproot yourself from your daily routines and habits, because we're creatures of habit, right? We fall into a routine, we fall into a habit, and then we do the same things. So when you force yourself and uproot yourself from these rituals and habits, you have to reevaluate and reassess everything that's important to you, because you're going into new routines and rituals, and it's like you get to choose all over again how you're going to build your life, really. So when I first got here, I was before I got here, I was going to trials. Training was a huge part of my life. 4 or 5 times a week, I was at the gym with my community training. When I got here, I told myself I have a few business goals and some big business things that I need to do, to where I'm not going to join a gym until I complete X, Y, and Z. So that was a huge change. But in that, and not having lots of my time filled with training and my normal like busy work routine in the office, I had a lot of clarity come in as to how I want to move forward in this next chapter of my life. The types of people that I want to surround myself with, now that I have an opportunity to kind of rebuild community, rebuild friendships, spending time not only in our backyard here in the sunroof Lene thing, but also having the beach, going over, taking some walks on the beach, and continuing my meditation practice here. And that's, found out what woodpeckers sound like, some cool stuff in nature, learning about these different fruits over here. Like we have what are they called? Like a Romulan or some crazy like fuzzy thing, lychees, some tropical fruits, really enjoying some of the nature, the different types of rain, and then clarity through the stillness of not only being alone, but specifically with meditation, of really trying to just focus on my breath, clear my mind. I feel like what happens is that when you clear your mind of having constant stimulus and constant thoughts, average person has about 60,000 thoughts a day. When you clear that for brief moments, that's when, boom, those lightning bolt ideas come in. Like sometimes it's always when you're doing nothing, when some great idea will come to you. It's never when you're on the phone or when you're scrolling social media or when you're doing the busy work. It's always in the stillness. So I've noticed I've had a lot more things coming in where I'm like, oh yeah, like that's something I need to do. That's a great idea, because I haven't had as much of my time filled with people, things, and stimulus.
Yeah, and we've known that for a while, right? That's why people say keep a notebook and a pen next to your bed. So when you have a dream or an idea when you're sleeping, you can write it down. Well, why does that dream or idea come to you when you're sleeping? Because you're literally doing nothing else. You're not multitasking. You're not distracted. You're just resting. And I think, sometimes loneliness, people look at it as a negative word, but stillness is a great thing, right? And maybe that's the word for it, is stillness. Like when you're alone, are you creating stillness for yourself? Or what do you do? And I think that's where I've grown a ton in my personal life, is back before, if I was alone, I'd be watching TV, or like I would do something.
Mm-hmm.
But, even up in Wyoming, even though we do have family close, and sometimes they'd have family campfires, so they'd all be up at a place doing something. Like sometimes I'd just go off by myself and just sit alone and just
Yeah.
think and just listen and take the break from, even though it's a small group of people, just from even being around that small group of people.
Mm-hmm.
And as I've gotten older, I've started to value and appreciate more just time to myself.
Yeah. So what about how loneliness can be a bad thing? How can that be? How has that been a bad thing for you in your life?
Well, I mean, I think first off, people develop bad habits, right? Like if they're alone and they're not creating stillness out of it, they're not using it positively, it's easy to fall in the rut of entertaining yourself with negative behaviors or poor choices. I would say that's one of the first things. And then secondly, I would say that it can be a bad thing if uh, you don't control your thoughts and your thoughts start to spiral on you, right? And we see it all the time where somebody has something bad happen to them and they start to isolate themselves and they push other people away. And then, well, now you're alone, but it's not helping you grow. It's not helping you overcome. It's isolating you and further separating you from people that can help you or people that are invested and love you and want to bring you back to where you were before the event happened. So that's always a concern for me, right? Is when I see people that are lonely resorting to like alcohol or drugs or isolation, and all of a sudden they continue to just separate themselves further and further from the group that they once thrived in. Right. So I guess that's when I would say that's a bad thing, right? If your loneliness is contributing, and I wouldn't even say loneliness, I would say the stillness and being alone contributes to your growth and it contributes to the communities you're in and it helps you build, then it's very good for you. But if you're using it as isolation to avoid actually dealing with what you should be dealing with, then it's a very negative thing, right? I have this issue, but instead of dealing with it, I'll just go off and be by myself. I'll just quit hanging out with this group because I don't want to deal with this. I'll just sit at home every night or eliminate my circle of friends. I think that's a very, very unhealthy. And, quite honestly, I think a lot of people do that in today's world. What about you? What do you think? When's it become a bad thing?
I couldn't agree more. I think it becomes a bad thing with a lot of the things you just said, and I'll use myself and my own experience as an example. So it can be a bad thing if it's just like overindulgence in some of these kind of like not productive at all leisure activities. So like binge watching some shows. You're alone, you can spend a whole fucking day just watching a Netflix series, smoking weed and just doing nothing. Smoking weed for me and like getting the munchies, and just like stimulating yourself with the pleasure of eating food. And I'll admit, so when I first got here to Florida, I stopped training, and I mean, I didn't really gain that much weight, but it was a few pounds, like maybe I think I gained about like 10 pounds because I didn't really change. And it's not like I was, munching out, but I wasn't active in my routines. And that just shows how just a little bit of indulgence over time can compound. Because I wouldn't say I was still going to the gym to lift some weights, but I didn't have my high output of cardio, but I was still eating like I did, right? Like having a bowl of cinnamon toast crunch and bananas at night, snacking here and there, like eating like I was training for fighting, and I gained some weight. So negative things like that, binge watching shows, eating food, negative spiraling thoughts, video games. There's, watching pornography, which can be negative for the mind. There's just the negative self-talk, drinking alcohol. You can get caught up in drinking too much or any substance abuse too much. So those are all negative things that I've had experience with in my life, of like spending too much alone time and then really feeling isolated, kind of cutting yourself off from the world. On the flip side, there's a lot of positive, productive things you can do with being alone that may seem a little boring, right? That may not give you that immediate stimulation like some of these negative things, but that can really propel you forward in a productive direction when you do them. Meditation, for example, journaling, cleaning your environment, really setting up your environment for how you want to be. Like a few episodes ago, you saw I had these stacks of book, and now, I'm organizing my place. So really creating my environment how I want it to be. Reading is a fantastic thing to do on your alone time. Time in nature, right? Like walking the beach the other day. I went out to the pier, just sat, was watching the pelicans, observing nature, spending time alone. So there's a lot of great things that you can do while alone that I think are very nourishing and fulfilling to your life. And it usually is these things that are more still, not as much of a stimulating effect.
And they very seldom require substances.
Exactly.
Right? I think that's one of the things, right? People think like, oh, I need to do this or that. Man, if you're alone and maybe you're struggling with something, just sit with it for a bit and write about it and problem solve. Like, how do I get myself over this? And how did I get myself here? Right. And that's one of the big things is we're always responsible for where we are. We're also responsible to get where we want to get. So if you're feeling lonely right now and you're down, like sit with it for a minute, think and write down, like, how did I end up here? What choices put me here? And then on next to it, write down, okay, what choices can I make starting right now to get me out of this? And very few times will it include being drunk or high or laying in bed watching TV still in your pajamas all day. Very seldom will that be the answer. But writing, thinking, getting up and moving your body, even if you're alone, you can still go for a walk. You can still move your body and start creating physical endorphins that help you see problems differently, to help you start finding solutions for whatever it is that you're facing.
Mm-hmm. So what are your top things that you like to do in your alone time, Jerrod?
Man, that's changed a lot over time. But now in my alone time, man, I love just listening to all the birds and looking for deer and just watching all the nature that's around me. And sometimes I like just sitting there and not having anybody talk to me and not just to have no noise whatsoever that we're creating and just listening to all the noises. I'll tell you something that's interesting going up to Wyoming is we have real tall aspen trees and pine trees. I think they're pine trees near us. They're super tall. And it's almost like the ocean. It reminds me of when you hear the waves coming in. We can hear like breezes coming to us because the trees way out in front of us. You'll look and you can see them start swaying. You can hear them, and then like 5 seconds later, the breeze hits you. Whoa. So I'm just mesmerized by that because living in a city, like I never saw that.
Right.
And it's so loud. Like sometimes you'll be like, damn, is that a car coming down the road or an airplane? It's literally just the trees whipping around because a breeze is coming at you.
Dang.
But like if I didn't sit and just appreciate, I would never even notice that. So that's a big thing for me, is just to sit quietly and listen and watch all the stuff going on. And then writing's been very therapeutic for me, and sharing stories. So I love in that alone time just getting my computer out and starting to write some different stuff down and channeling my thoughts, and then reading. I always feel better in my alone time if I do read and kind of improve my knowledge on certain topics. What about you?
Man, I love that because I have a lot of those similar things, and it's changed a lot for me as well over the past few years, and even just over the past few months of being here in Florida. Meditation and yoga has been with me now for a few years. And last year I got my certification to teach beginners intro to yoga. And since then I have felt like intro to meditation. And since then have felt like a push to get deeper into that. So experimenting with different types of meditation. And then my yoga practice really just being with Courtney has really, really developed. But lately, most recently, I've also really been enjoying some different types of writing. So it's been for about like the past 4 weeks with my accountability group. I've been doing 2 to 3 times a week journaling with prompts, which I've never really done. My journaling has always been more of like recordings of my life, of like what's happened over the past couple of weeks, like how have I been feeling, what I'm feeling. But the journaling with prompts has been really interesting. And then I also have been working out of this book. It's called A Year of Zen. And there's also some really different prompts too, which have been very fun as well for me, which I really haven't, for most of my life, I haven't enjoyed writing, but recently I have. I wanted to share something that really struck me as a fun entry in this year of Zen real quick. So the entry was, it's called The Still Point, and they asked, what is the still point of the turning world? T.S. Eliot said it was neither from nor toward. Reflect. And here's what I wrote. There is no still point. Everything is in motion, in the act of balancing, always trying to reach that state of perfect balance that does not actually exist. Yet, we continue to strive towards this non-existing point. That's the beautiful paradox of life. Now go and find that still point that does not exist, because the only way you can find it is by always trying. So having, that was a really like just a poetic writing for me. And I wouldn't have had the opportunity to go into a prompt like this and think in that way if it weren't for having a lot of alone time over here.
Yeah, for sure, man. It's funny. I was just trying to scroll real quick because I keep a quote on my computer. And it's funny you say it's T.S. Eliot because that's who I have too. And it's one of my favorites. It's what we call the beginning is often the end, and to make an end is to make a beginning. The end is where we start from.
Ooh.
So I like that because like even in the stillness of just sitting, like I ended whatever task I was doing. Now I get to begin just observing and thinking. And then when I end that, I get to begin something new, and I think having that and sitting by myself, because, many years ago, if you'd have told me like, dude, you don't have anything to do for 2 hours, I'd have booked something else in there. I'd have went and found something else. I'd have walked around just to find somebody to talk to for those 2 hours, or went and put another task in or scheduled another appointment. And now I'm like, okay, cool. I got 2 hours. I can move my body. I can sit by myself. I can just reflect. And what I've found with that is I can truly start to make my days longer, and I can start to slow things down around me instead of feeling like I constantly have to be on the go.
I love that. T.S. Eliot for the win.
Yeah, no, that's good. Twice in one episode. Yeah, so I think being alone is something we should all look to embrace, and maybe even schedule time in your day. Maybe even put 10 minutes in your calendar to just meditate, or just to sit with your thoughts, or to reflect, or to go out of your office and just listen to all whatever's going on around you, and just be more observant. And I think when we do that, it helps shift at least for me, it helps shift my focus from I'm so important to I'm really not that important. In the scheme of the earth, it doesn't care. You know what I mean? Like my problem today really isn't that big a deal. And I think it helps you with your perspective. And maybe that's why they don't want us sitting alone. Maybe that's why we've always been kind of conditioned to stay on the go. Is this more productive, maybe short term, but long term, there's many deficits to it, many negative outcomes.
Yeah, I think I think people are just easier to influence and control when they're constantly stimulated, because you never have that clarity to really ground down and know what you truly want, what's truly best for you. You're just going with the masses.
Yeah,
So yeah, I think when we're talking about alone too, we're talking about like distraction free too. Like you're
absolutely.
like not with your phone, not with your computer, not just alone in sense of human beings, but in a sense of like your stimuli.
Right. No, I 100% agree. And that's one of the things I love about being up there is we very seldom have our phones with us. We don't get connectivity up there. So you're really like alone. Like you're not being influenced by any other outputs other than what's right in front of you.
I know, man. I can't even hit you up during the week anymore.
I know there's
I sent
downsides to it too, but
I sent you a picture of the mini pen. I got a response like a week later. I was like, oh
was
shit,
it
I forgot.
really?
No, it was like 4 or 5 days, but still,
Yeah.
I was like, dang, that's wild, man. You're really up there.
Yeah. No, literally like that. Yeah, that it felt like it had just come in when I saw it. So yeah, but like we drove back and all of a sudden like we get closer to Fort Collins and all of a sudden my phone goes crazy and I got text messages from like weeks ago. And we get
Mhm.
enough connectivity up there. I can send some stuff every now and then, but apparently not receive a ton of it.
Well, I love that because that shows you how ingrained in society it is to constantly be on our phones, constantly to where you just take a couple days and you come back and it's like, whoa, like all of this stuff. And it's like, did you really miss out on anything?
Oh, that's the funny thing. Like we scheduled to go to town to grocery shop and they have like a little coffee shop that you can get Wi-Fi. And like I scheduled a couple hours and I get there and like after an hour, I'm like, all right, I'm already bored with this. Like there's only so many emails you need, but now I do need to have a little more discipline with that because I do need to use that time for marketing and promoting products and our courses and stuff. But at the same point, I don't need to be connected all day, every day like I thought I needed to.
Right.
What do you got for wrap up today, Ollie? I lost my notes here. I was clicking around
Well,
trying
to
to find
wrap
that
up,
quote.
to wrap up, I think that we need to schedule some time to be alone and choosing what productive, and it doesn't even have to be, productive in a sense of like getting something accomplished. Like it could be meditation or it could simply be a walk out in nature. It could be, writing out, find a prompt, Google best journaling prompts, Google self-awareness prompt, whatever you're trying to do, some writing, some reading, some alone time that's distraction free of stimuli. Try to make that a regular habit, a regular routine throughout your weeks. And if you can, even take it to the next level, like Jerrod, scheduling a few days, even a few weeks off the grid can be extremely beneficial. There's people like Bill Gates. He does some of his deepest work and most productive works when he has his think weeks. Twice a year, he'll spend a week absolutely by himself, just with journals, pens, and books in a cabin out in the woods. And there's many high achievers in history. So many musicians, right, write their music when they're totally isolated. People train for things by themselves out in the wilderness, so high performers, high achievers always have some sort of isolation practice before they come back into the world to perform. So just keep in mind that it's not only beneficial for your psyche, but probably beneficial for your performance in all aspects of life too.
Yeah, and if you don't have access to that kind of stuff, I know deprivation chambers are starting to become popular in urban areas, right? And what is that? It's just putting you in a dark room, like the float tank stuff, right? Where you're weightless, it's dark, there's nothing but you and your thoughts in there for a period of time.
Yeah, I need to try one of those.
Yeah, I haven't tried one either, but I think we also got to shift our mindset that being alone with our thoughts and by ourselves is a bad thing. Like we got to shift that mindset that like it's good for us to sit and to reflect on our days and who we are and who we want to become and how we're getting there. And And like we like to say, take inventory of the path we're on. And is it leading us to where we really want to be? Or are we just doing it because other people expect it? Or it's just what we've done, so we're comfortable there? And you usually won't find answers to that by continuing to fill your day with tasks. You're going to find those answers when you sit and just really reflect.
Mm-hmm. Amen.
Well, we appreciate you all being part of our community. Again, we want to encourage you to join us over on Patreon, where we have special group meetings and more behind the scenes stuff, and really help us grow this community of purposeful warriors around the world. We thank you for being here so far, and we look forward to the journey forward. And remember, team, life is far too short to live any other way than on purpose. We will see you all again next week.